Let's jump right into it with the host of the US report, James Morrow. James, much excitement today as Prime Minister Anthony Albanese finally secured that yes, announcing his engagement to Jodie Haydon. He could become the first PM to have a wedding in office.
Well, yeah, he could. There's already, though, Rita, and by the way, it's great to be here, and congratulations on the new show, a lot of cynicism around this move by the Prime Minister. I mean, first of all, look, I think we've all got to be honest about it, that proposing on Valentine's Day, Rita, I think that's a little bit naff, but particularly when he's got so many other, come on, you know what I'm saying, Rita. It's a bit naff. It's a bit, really, are we really 16 here? But also, there's a lot of talk about how much pressure he's under at the moment in Parliament with Andrew Giles, with today's employment numbers, which aren't looking too hot either. Gee, what a good way to reset the media narrative, Rita. I don't know, call me cynical.
Oh, James, obviously you have been hurt because where is your romantic side? No, I think there are plenty of people who feel precisely as you do. And you mentioned the employment data. I mean, that is a consequential issue nobody seems to be talking about today. All I kept hearing about was the engagement news. But today's employment data was not good, and that's putting it lightly. Unemployment rate has jumped to 4.1%. It's the highest, James, in 2 years. That is not good.
Well, it's not good. And also, I've spoken to some bank economists today. They see this softening employment market continuing. They don't think this is a one-off. This is going to continue. The growth in employed people was only 500. The economy added 500 new jobs to the economy in the last period. At the same time, underemployment is up. And, this all goes to this bigger narrative, Rita, that Australian households are moving backwards. Our household income is moving backwards. Our per capita GDP is moving backwards. We've got a very large migration intake that masks a lot of these things, but the pressures are really starting to show. And I think these employment numbers are a big warning bell for the government.
Now, you're a man of many talents. You are the National Affairs Editor for the Daily Telegraph, as well as the Sky News host. And you wrote in today's paper about the Albanese government pushing for treaty and truth-telling despite last year's overwhelming vote against an Indigenous voice to Parliament. Why is the PM hell-bent on defying the will of the Australian people? This is an important issue, and he seems to be at odds with the majority across the nation. And I know you spoke to Jacinta Price about this as well.
Jacinta Price said, exactly what I think a lot of people are saying. We had the referendum. We said, no, we do not want these symbolic things because, ultimately things like treaty and truth-telling are symbolic, and they also have the real risk of being very divisive, and they don't do anything to close those gaps. And I spoke to Jacinta Price. I spoke to Anthony Dillon, a lot of respected thinkers on this sort of thing. There's real practical things that can be done to help those Indigenous communities that need them. But this idea that we keep people separate and that there's something inherently always different about Indigenous Australians versus every other Australian, it's divisive. And all of these things that Anthony Albanese wants to do, they push that narrative. And it's not helpful for anybody. It's not helpful for social cohesion. And it's not helpful for the people who actually need practical help on the ground. Jacinta Price says there needs to be an audit. I think she's absolutely right because, we know billions of dollars have poured into communities with very, very little to show for it.
Well, yes, that gap is still there. It's not getting any better despite the billions we spend in this area every year. Let's talk about Queensland Premier Stephen Miles very quickly. I'm going to look at him in the next, later in the program, but he's had a rough couple of weeks, we've got to say, and he did try to lighten the mood with this Valentine's Day post, but it wasn't well received, James. I choose to make trains in Queensland happy. He's got a bit of Ralph Wiggum in him. Why would he want to highlight that?
I mean, just look at him. Just look at him. He actually looks a bit like, old little Ralphie there. And he's sitting at the back of the bus there, and he's looking at his poll numbers and goes, "Oh no, I'm in danger." So he puts up these dumb memes. I mean, he's really seriously in a lot of trouble here, Rita.
He really is. I mean, I don't know why you would. And a lot of the responses were putting up Ralph Wiggum images just to drive that point home.
Yeah.
Now let's go to more important stuff. US, and we seem to see this protection racket continue for the Biden family. We've got Hunter's former business associate, Tony Bobulinski, testifying in the Joe Biden impeachment inquiry this week. He went on the record to say that the United States law enforcement have been unwilling to speak with him, that they are supposedly investigating this, and he's talking about corruption. The allegations that are being made here are quite serious, and yet he's had no contact from the FBI or the Justice Department.
Well, I think probably we know, Rita, that the reason why that's happened is because the FBI and the other letter agencies, they've been too busy out there trying to bring 93 different charges against Donald Trump and stop him from winning the presidency in November. But this is really serious stuff, though. I mean, the allegations are, and what we've seen now is Tony Bobulinski has come out and said Joe Biden was the big guy in the whole sort of Biden, some people call it crime family effort to monetize the family name, office, and connections to sell influence to foreign governments, among other things. Really, really shocking stuff. Really shocking stuff. And yet, apparently the FBI doesn't want to know about it. And it goes to this narrative that the FBI, the Department of Justice, is corrupt and politicized in the United States, which is terrible because, these agencies should be above politics. And so when you start to lose faith, Rita, in things like that, it's really so bad for the country, even beyond just letting the Bidens skate on these charges.
And I think it's something a lot of Australians don't understand because we just get the reports about indictments and this. They don't understand that in the US, what has happened with the Justice Department, with the FBI, CIA, and how politicised it has become. And you see the polling in the US, the lack of trust in these institutions is astonishing. The overwhelming majority of people don't trust them. And that is, again, a crisis that needs to be addressed. And we've also had stunning revelations. More on that is with what happened in 2016, the Russian collusion hoax that was thrust upon the country for a good 4 years. It's now been revealed that the CIA and foreign intelligence agencies illegally surveilled 26 associates of Donald Trump in the run-up to the 2016 election, which ultimately triggered the false accusations that Trump's campaign had been colluding with Russia. What do you make of these developments, James?
Well, look, I mean, it's shocking stuff, but for, Rita, you and I have spoken about this a lot on The Outsiders. I've spoken a lot about this on the U.S. report, but, it's not a surprise to me. We know that the way that they laundered all of these allegations against Trump, including, those very, shall we say, lurid allegations about him and his behavior in a Moscow hotel room. But let's put that to one side, even though it is a bit late in the evening, that these were laundered through foreign intelligence agencies, and that the CIA was involved with this doesn't surprise me one bit. But again, this is this whole thing. You have this effort to jail the opposition leader, essentially, that's going on right now. And yet the media is so happy to trumpet these things. And yet, on the other things, the Bobulinski things, they say, oh, well, they're unproven allegations, so I don't know why Trump keeps repeating them. Well, I mean, you see the game.
Well, absolutely. They keep saying there's no smoking gun. Well, except from the testimony of people who were there, the emails, the text messages. There is a wealth of data, and yet they ran with the Russian collusion hoax based on just the flimsiest allegations, which have since been debunked. Now, this is an own goal for the Republicans, who voted to expel George Santos from his seat in New York. It was a marginal seat. Well, James, the Democrats have managed to flip that seat. You've got to give it to the Democrats. They seem to have a little bit more party discipline than the Republicans. You've got all sorts of shady characters like Senator Bob Menendez who are feeling very safe. They're not scared of being expelled at all.
Look, I mean, this is just, this is a great lesson for people on the right of politics. Don't do what people who don't like you want you to do because you think they will like you. This is what they did. They said, oh, the media is making all this fun of us for having this weirdo George Santos. And he was absolutely a weirdo. Let's not, gloss over that. He's a strange cat with a lot of just bizarre stuff in his life and his history and lies and so on. But whatever. Bob Menendez, just across the Hudson River in New Jersey, he's still in Congress. They found gold bars hidden in his sofa. He has been peddling influence, allegedly, I think, to Egypt and possibly other countries. All sorts of real sort of classic corruption with the money and the briefcases and, the sort of stuff you would have seen, in the 80s or something like that. And the Democrats, they say, well, no, he's still in. We're not letting him go. So, Republicans do this. People on the right here do this all the time, too. The media tells them to do something, and they jump, and they say, oh, they'll like us now. And then it's like, Lucy with the football in the cartoons, and yoink, they pull him away. And
they don't learn, though. This is the thing. They do not learn the lesson. They don't learn. Now, I know you don't like talking Harry and Meghan, but we're going to do it very briefly because they've adopted the Sussex title as their surname for themselves, for the children. It's reported that couple did it to unify the family. It's all over their relaunched website, but I don't know, James. I thought they promised the Queen to no longer use the royal name for their personal brands. I mean, this seems to be a bit of a betrayal of what the Queen wanted.
Well, it's absolutely a betrayal. I mean, and this is a betrayal of their commitments. They wanted out of the family. They got out of the family, but no, we still want the Sussex name. I mean, I'm expecting them to start selling schlocky bath towels or something like that, with their names on them at this point. It's just, they're just grifters. And, poor Harry, he got pulled into this. And, there's a lot of issues now and questions around with the King's health, whether the family might be unified again. But it's like this constant, just sleazy behavior. I think people are sick of it. They're not listening anymore.
No. And you know what? I don't have any sympathy for Harry. I know a lot of people just blame Meghan and say Harry's a victim. But, the man's 40. He's making his own decisions. Now, finally, we speak a lot about young people suffering climate anxiety. It's widespread nowadays. But we have to remember catastrophist climate predictions are nothing new and they have a real cost associated with them. This letter in the Wall Street Journal has gone viral and, James, it's just desperately sad. Let's have a look at it. It says, I was a college student when I read Mr. Elrich's The Population Bomb. I took it to heart and now have no grandchildren, but 50 years later, the population has increased to 8 billion without dire consequences. I was gullible and stupid. That's from Kenneth. There are so many of these catastrophist climate predictions and they don't come true, and yet these characters don't pay any sort of a cost. This Paul Elrich is still put up by the media as some sort of a guru. He's still given a platform to spread his crazy predictions.
This was all big in the 70s and 80s. A guy named Paul Ehrlich, he wrote a book called The Population Bomb and said that, the world was going to see riots and food starvation, all sorts of problems because the population was going to grow too high and all sorts of, climate mayhem and other sort of environmental mayhem would ensue. None of this, of course, happened. The world got bigger. The world got richer. Technology allowed us to grow more crops and feed more people. But it's this mentality that still infects the left, and we see it with Greta Thunberg. You can go to the ABC website right now, and I guarantee you, within like 2 keystrokes, you'll find some piece by somebody saying, I'm 32 and I'm never going to have a child because I wouldn't bring them into this climate change world and all of this sort of stuff. And, of course, it becomes very sad because, of course, as people grow up, they realize that all of these youthful obsessions have consequences. And then, they're sad and alone and, and don't have anybody. And they've wasted a lot of their life and opportunities, thinking the world's going to end. That's no way to live. And what are we doing telling young people who should be optimistic that the world is going to end and that they're in a crisis and a catastrophe and that their very existence threatens the planet? I mean, it's just evil, Rita. There's no other word.